With 5 wins, the Blues are in the 8 and they appear finals bound for the first time since 2013, even if they have given their fan base a few little heartaches along the way. Riley Beveridge, you know the Blues almost more intimately than anyone. What have you made of their season so far?
I reckon they've been good without being great, and I think the fact they're 5-2 is pretty promising for them because they've had some hiccups along the way. We mentioned the Gold Coast defeat being one of them over there at Metricon Stadium. They looked pretty disappointing against Fremantle as well. The Dockers have made a lot of sides look disappointing this year. And they've had some not so convincing wins. You look at Hawthorn where they led by 6 goals early and got pegged back late. You look at the Port Adelaide game where they led by 50 points and got pegged back late. I think the most promising thing to take from the first 7 weeks from a Carlton perspective is the fact they're 5-2 and they haven't really put a four-quarter performance together yet at any stretch of the season. So if they can iron out some of those kinks, and Michael Voss, let's not forget, is only 7 weeks into rebuilding this side from scratch virtually, I think they're going to be well placed going into the back half of the season. But if I had to say at the moment, I think it's good without being great.
So those momentum swings, they're still hurting the Blues a little bit, but what has been the biggest surprise for you so far this season?
From an individual perspective, the big surprise for me, I think, has been George Hewitt. I think when he came, there was a perception that Adam Cerra was the big name recruit and George Hewitt was just someone that would play his role every week. I think he's gone to another level. He was always a good player at Sydney. I think he's becoming a really great player at Carlton, averaging over 30 disposals, almost the best clearance and contested player in the comp right now. And I think what you're seeing is Patrick Cripps is having a career best year, arguably. That's as a byproduct, I think, of what George Hewitt's been able to do. I think George Hewitt's playing the role they've placed on Patrick Cripps over the last 4 or 5 years. That really in and under contested ball winner who gets probably 75% of his possessions being handballs and first use out of the stoppage. I think that's George Hewitt now, which is allowing Cripps to get in the outside, impact more forward of centre. So I think he's having an impact himself, but he's also enabling others to have a bigger impact in the contest. And I think what he's been able to do through the midfield has been awesome for Carlton, and I think he's probably borderline All-Australian. I know we're about to get to All-Australian soon. I think he's been borderline All-Australian so far. And
the word coming out of the Blues is that everyone just absolutely loves George Hewitt, and he might be one of the first magnets I think that Michael Voss does put on the board every week. Now, All-Australians, you mentioned Paddy Cripps before, the skipper. I mean, he's in All-Australian form, isn't he?
Yeah, he definitely is. I think he'd be a lock in that midfield right now. We mentioned George Hewitt. I think Jacob Wiedering down back. I think Jacob Wiedering probably could have and probably should have maybe already had 2 or 3 All-Australian blazers to his name. He doesn't have any. I think that's a byproduct of the side struggling in the last couple of years. I think now he's about to start getting the recognition that he deserves. I think he'd be an All-Australian defender at the moment. A sneaky one that I want to put on your radar as well for an All-Australian, just as an outside at the moment, is Adam Sard. I think he's gone really under the radar for the impact he's managed to do. Everyone knows what Adam Sard does offensively based on the fact that he's a speedster, he runs, he takes bounces, he gains a lot of metres with his possessions. But what he's been able to do defensively, he hardly loses a one-on-one contest to his opponent. I think he's really improved that aspect of his game since getting to Carlton. He's one that I think would be an outsider for the All-Australian squad at the moment.
Certainly one to watch. Now, Riles, the health of a club, we know it's so important if you are to play finals. The big injury is, of course, Mark Pittonet. He, of course, went down with that PCL injury. How else are the Blues poised?
Yeah, that's the big one at the moment because they're light in their ruck stocks. They've got Alex Murkov, the former volleyballer, who's on their rookie list, who they really promise. They've seen promising signs for him. He's still a bit raw, so it's going to leave a lot of the burden to Tom de Koning in the last sort of second half of the season. But aside from that, I think the big worry for Carlton at the moment is their key defensive stocks. They probably came into the year when Liam Jones announced his sudden retirement thinking they couldn't afford too many injuries down back. Well, they've picked up a lot. So Mitch McGovern's going to be out for an extended period, re-aggravating his hamstring injury last week. They've got Luke Parks battling a foot injury. They've got Oscar McDonald, who's a week-by-week proposition with his back injury, but he's had back issues before, so Carlton doesn't want to rush him back. I think they can't really afford any injuries to Wiedering or Lewis Young at the moment because they're the only 2 down there that can sort of hold the fort, that are above 195 centimetres and can play on key forwards every week. So they can't afford too many more injuries to their key defensive stocks.
History would show 5-2. Most clubs do go on to play finals. What about the Blues? Can they do it?
I think they will now. I went into the year thinking that they had a really tough start to the year. They played Richmond and the Bulldogs in their first couple of weeks. Port Adelaide was the top 4 side last year. I kind of didn't expect them to be 5-2 at this point in the season. The fact they are, and they've still got so much room for improvement, is probably a positive for them. I think they'll find their best footy second half of the year. I think the way Michael Voss has built this side, he was saying pre-season, we spoke to him on afl.com.au before the year, and he said he didn't expect them to hit their straps straight away. He said there was a lot of work to do when he first walked through the doors with his new assistant coaching team. So I think they'll find their best footy second half of the year, but the fact they've got a 5-2 start to build from, I think is really promising for them. I think now they should be looking at top 4. If you're 5-2, that's where your eyes should be set for. That's where you should be aiming for. I don't think they've shown that they're a top 4 side in the first 7 weeks of the year. I think they can do that in the back half of the season. The fact they're 5-2 already gives them a great platform to build from.
A great platform to build from indeed, and still plenty of room to improve for the Blues. That's what we've made of them so far.